Yes, that's right, because we're going to be broadcasting this on what is going to be a bit of a joint birthday, joint anniversary. So how long have we been having sort of almost joint birthdays? It's
Exactly. A
been
long
a long
time.
time. So this is going out. It's going to be the 4th of October, which is my actual birthday, 8 days after your birthday. But it will be the 1 year anniversary of Tipping My Fedora podcast. So there you go. So you're the perfect person to be on here. I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. Welcome to this special anniversary edition of Tipping My Fedora, which has been a podcast for 1 year precisely today, and my very special guest is Professor Stacey Abbott, who is just one of my oldest and best friends in the whole wide world, and here we're going to talk about one of the things that she loves the most, the John Wick series.
Would you help set the mood for our new guest?
Let us begin.
Are services still off limits to me?
What do you need?
Guns. Lots of guns.
Well, I rewatched the first 3 with my mum.
Oh, wow.
So mum's opinions are going to be part of this podcast, Ez. Good and bad. But she's basically a fan. She'd never seen any of them before. So that was really fun.
Yes, well, I had a conversation with my siblings recently about it, but I may not share their opinions, which was sort of... Well, the argument was, the fights go on too long.
Well, that may come up. But okay, so we're here to talk about John Wick. And we're here to talk about John Wick, I think, in slightly broad terms, because it seems to me that if we decided to do every film one by one and then talk about the Wickiverse, or whatever we're going to call it, it's going to take too long. Nobody's got that kind of podcasting availability. Do you remember when you went to see the first John Wick film?
I do remember seeing it in the sense I had seen the trailer and was quite excited about it. I'm a big Keanu Reeves fan. And even from the trailer, that kind of action, gunplay, kung fu type thing appeals to me. So we did go see it with my husband, Simon Brown, who has been a guest on this podcast. And I went to see it at our local cinema, and I had not really seen much fanfare about it. I think it was getting good reviews, but I hadn't really engaged with it. So I think what I remember was being blown away by it. Like, just in this, like, I felt like this film speaks to me, which may sound worrying, but just in a sense, it plays with lots of genres I really like. A Keanu Reeves in a return to form. Not that he had been away from form, but just finding a role that I think really worked for him in the ways that I've liked him in the past. I think he's done all kinds of stuff, but there's some things I like better than others. But I really felt like this was a return to form. And I do remember and we might talk about this more, but I remember, as someone who was a fan of the kind of Hong Kong action hero movies of the 1980s, my first response to this film was, that's what this is. Like, suddenly just going, it has all the aesthetics of Better Tomorrow, The Killers, films that I had a real affection for in the late 80s. And it felt really comforting to be in that world again, which, again, strange. But so I do remember seeing it in that context and going, wow, like this is really exciting. And then lots of other reasons to like it. But that was my memory of the first kind of screening of it, first of many.
Because I didn't see it at the cinema. And in fact, I have this feeling that I've only seen the 4th one at the cinema, which I saw with you and Simon. Yeah. And we had a very good time. Oddly enough, it's not necessarily my favorite, but I really enjoyed all of them. But I feel slightly disappointed that I just didn't go see it at the cinema, because there's always something terrific about seeing a film made, shall we say, for fans of certain genres and certain approaches to filmmaking. And they clearly are fans too, which is, it's hard for that to really work out successfully. Usually it falls down in a number of places. And I think it's always nice when you see something that, no, basically, you're kind of nailing it as you go. And at the same time, as the films progress, things got amplified. And I'm looking forward to us talking about that, because I'm curious about what your take on that is, and how much of that is a sort of, shall we say, an industrial thing, and how much of that is just something that just happens with sequels in general, and how much of that is to the benefit of this particular, and I hate to use the word, but inverted commas, air quotes, franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, we can call it a series. Maybe.
I am trying to stop myself from saying franchise. Not for any reason except the more I think about it, the more it is a series, because with a few variations, it's got a consistent production team, or they build, but same key director, some changes. And somehow to me, so I keep thinking, because it's chapter 1, 2 through 4, series seems to be better than franchise. But obviously it has become a franchise. The world has expanded into text beyond the original series, so it's a bit both, I suppose.
Okay, so we're going to focus on the 4 films, the core, the John Wick core is what we're going to focus. So, okay, what's the first one about? Well, I mean, which is not to say that's not what really happens. In a way, it's a very traditional noir premise, isn't it? It's kind of like you can tick several boxes. It's the assassin with a soul. It's the criminal who gets called in for one last job and then it all goes wrong. It's the killer who is betrayed by his own employer sort of narrative, that sort of thing. So we've seen all that before. It's New York or New Jersey, I guess, where he actually lives. We start the film also in a flashback situation. It's quite lightly done, but again, that feels very typical of those kinds of films. So we start with him crashing his car and falling out of the car, and at that point, so things aren't going well for John Wick, and we don't know who he is, we don't know anything, so that's quite good fun, I think. Then we flash back, although we don't get told it's a flashback. It's quite fun, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't. It just moves into the past because like this isn't Double Indemnity with the I'm going to tell you my story. There's no voiceover, but it does very quickly. And I think aesthetically and consistent with the series is the style tells you it's flashback, because suddenly it looks very different than the rainy nighttime scarred John Wick. And you see perhaps an emotionally scarred John Wick as he enters at the beginning of the flashback.
Well, in fact, on rewatching, because then, of course, we get brief little flashbacks, which is usually considered a bit of a no-no, but in fact, I think they get away with it. And it's one of those oddities of, I think, modern cinema, that the use of flashbacks to situate you and then come right back to the present and then another flashback. It's the sort of thing which in the 40s and 50s was unusual, and quite often you get criticized because you always feel like those sorts of films could potentially get lost in having lots of flashbacks. But now the idea that you have to sort of explicate something in visual terms is very standard. I'm not entirely convinced it's a good thing. I mean, in the sense that, well, it feels like silent cinema, this idea that you always have to show them thinking of something so that you understand what they're thinking, as opposed to just saying it or holding an object and asking the audience to join the dots. Instead, you have to be shown it. But here it's a horrible thing to say, but I was fascinated by that. Technically, the flashback is showing us still being sort of a killer, in the sense that he gives the okay for his ailing wife's treatment to be halted, which obviously it's very sad. Of all the things they could have shown us, they decided to pick on that one. So you assume it's a bit deliberate.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I don't mind. I know what you mean about, visual flashbacks, or, feeling, it's in a way we're not trusting our audience to work it out. But there's something about, I think, just what I like about those flashbacks is that they're quite brief. They don't spend a lot of time in the past. You get glimpses of them together happy. And what you get is like the same clip. There is a clip of them, this brief flashback, them being happy. Oh, and she's dying, and I think I quite like the fact that we're getting enough to get a sense this is him remembering. This is, this is never far from his thoughts, is this memory of her, but also a memory of her dying, like the two moments being intertwined. And I think they're given enough just to give us that emotional heart. to justify what comes later. I think you need a little bit of that. And I think Helen, like, she's one of the great
Yeah,
non-characters because
Bridget
she's ever
Moynihan, yes.
present. She is ever present, and yet her screen time is incredibly minimal. And in the later films, it just becomes the photo that every once in a while he'll come find somewhere, then that place where he's hidden another photo so that he doesn't lose that. I think for me, I think those are kind of really useful and necessary to kind of make that story real. And I kind of respect the fact that actually it's quite brief, it's quite economic. Now we move on to the funeral, to him being miserable, which he is.
Yes, I mean, it's the classic funeral. I mean, it's kind of like, when was the last time we saw a really beautiful funeral where everybody was sad? No, it's raining and everybody's gotten a brolly out, and we start getting sort of guest stars who are going to pay off a bit later on. But in fact, the opening part of the film, as I say, they can never do that again. So in a way, it's nice. I mean, they didn't know they were going to make a sequel, but it's great that they invest quite a lot of time in us getting to know him and the situation he's in, and they don't actually rush it. There is this fun thing in the documentary, The Wickest Pain, where they talk about that they shot for days and days of Keanu in that house because they were worried that they were going to get sort of typecast as just action people, so they wanted to show him suffering but quietly. You know, and was it the whole section where he's doing some bookbinding?
I know. I love that. The precision of him bookbinding. Yeah. And that's what I mean by economic. Like, having shot all that material, actually what they narrowed it down to, I think, really economic storytelling of he's sad. You see him. And the house is, you see just enough of him in that house, of it being this empty, cold space that captures enough. And then we disrupt it all. First with we'll talk about the dog. First with the dog, and then with the criminals later.
You're getting emotional about the dog already, Stace. Oh my God. It's kind of like, no, he's going to kill 789 people, but the dog. And it's going, okay, we'll have a nice long chat about the dog. But, okay.
We will. Yeah, we'll talk about the dog. We'll get to the moment about the dog. But I think there's something really nice about the economy of that, despite the fact that the economy was wasted because they shot so much, and it was such a short production.
Right? It's like 40 days, so right? Yeah.
Yeah. And they were already like thinking they couldn't do it all, but they spent 7-8 days shooting in a house.
Just madness.
Well, inexperienced directors, you know, and I think that's one of the things I think that makes this film so wonderful, is that you do have people who are very passionate about it, but also they're inexperienced, which I think is kind of why you get John Wick, because you got people who are coming in and not following the rules and not just, you know, they're just doing what they want to do and learning how to do it as they do it.
And also what kicks off the plot is this very banal thing, somebody sort of coveting your car, which, okay, it's what we learn. It's a 1970 oh God, what is it? Is it a Mustang?
I want to say, is it a Mustang? I think it's a Mustang.
Let's hope it's a Mustang.
Apologies to the audience. I am not great with cars, but I think it's a Mustang.
And this Russian guy wants it, and John Wick says, yeah, okay, never mind, and tries to just drive off and thinks he has. But my goodness me, they really must have wanted that car.
They did. They're not used to people saying no. But I think it's that, again, that telling thing of this Russian gangster played by Alfie Allen, who I think plays it really well. It's that everything has a price. You know, that's the world. Everything. What do you want for it? And it is miserable, this idea that, you know, he's not used to anyone telling him no, which we find out later. It becomes part of his character, that he's clearly the spoiled rat Russian gangster who's just used to having his way. So away, not a lot of sympathy for him.
And so they break into his house. They do terrible things to his other car as well. I mean, let's just preempt that, which is very funny. He's going to stick a baseball bat through the windscreen of the other non-old car that he has. Yeah. And they want to steal his car, so of course they beat the ever-loving hell out of him. And then, unfortunately, the dog turns up, and the dog wants to help John. And we had all these kind of cute scenes with the dog, who we know is the last remnant of what his wife got for him. and it was a present that arrived after she passed away. I don't know how easy that would be to schedule in real life. They probably text you, say, will you be at home? Because otherwise we're going to leave the doggy on your doorstep for 3 days. You know.
Of all the things to nitpick in this film, though, let's be honest.
Oh, there are many more. Yes, but
Exactly.
no, this is exactly what Mum and I were saying when we were watching it. So it says, well, Mum, if you're going to start saying that this is not very realistic, I got news for you.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be many moments or so. No, I don't think that would really
It's
work.
not strong on plausibility. Wait for the end of it, chapter 3. Yeah.
Yeah. But the dog.
So the dog turns up, and sadly, basically, the dog gets fridged, which is very sad. We don't see it happen, which is great. In that documentary, they're very funny about all the meetings and the lengthy back and forth about whether it's okay to kill the dog, because it is this kind of, I mean, how many films are there in which they kill the dog? I don't know if you remember Payback, the Mel Gibson film.
Yes.
But, you know, there was that whole thing. One of the reshoots was he killed the dog in the original director's cut. Yeah. And one of the reasons they went back to reshoot was this time the dog's going to be all right. You know, is this...
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it turns an audience off. And I do know many people who have hesitated watching John Wick because they know the dog will die in it. And what I tell them is that it's really, and I say that, like, we can joke. To me, that scene is really painful. You know, as you know, I'm a great dog lover.
You are.
I have been my entire life. I've had many dogs. I love my dogs. It's really painful, and thank goodness we don't see it. But you do hear it, like, you know, and I think you hear the kind of the whelp, of the dog, and then you get that so tragic shot of the blood along the floor as the dog is clearly crawled to lay next to John before it dies. So it's really, and I think it's very deliberately played, like it wants us. They want us to be crying, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really painful. But as I've told loads of people who with like dogs, you know, you can close your eyes and not see it. But all the rest of the dogs are okay in these films, and there are loads of dogs. So they justify it. Like, and I'm not saying you need a justification. I'm just saying it's not random. It is so important to the story that that's, if he was just going after all these guys because of his car, I think it would be harder to sympathize. It'd be fun. It'd be loads of fun. But I think the fact that he's going because of the dog and because what the dog means to him, and it's this connection with the dog, his wife through the dog, you know, it's really important. It's why we should feel that pain of that scene. Because, you know, as Keanu Reeves says, Wick is pain. You know, but I think it is really important because it does drive it forward. And yes, it will become a running joke in the film. You did it for a dog, but and I think that's, for me, that's enough. But I think it is because it's about emotional connection and the possibility of being something more. That the dog, like his wife, represents connection and being able to be something that can make an emotional connection rather than something that it just robotically can go around killing people.
Well, also because it's a film that in many ways talks about that, and yet you're primarily surrounded by people who are not only incapable of making sort of emotional connections with other humans, but in fact consider that to be a bad thing. And so therefore, you know, you start with this, and then you'd like to think you build up. Now, I don't know if you build up, but I think you build outwards, because certainly you have to reach that point. What is it, 70% into the film, when he sort of tells us why, he's back. You know, you get that scene where he says, "Yes, I'm back." and that's sort of how we get there. You do nonetheless get the great John Leguizamo, who gets to have some of the funniest lines in the film.
Absolutely.
And obviously that bit when he brings up the bad guy, as it were, the father of the lad who's done this terrible thing, and he sort of says they stole his car and they killed his dog, and it was John Wick. And the guy goes, "Oh."
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think that is a great moment. Like, you've had this, you know, when you think of the film, how it's structured, you have tragedy, you have recovery, you have the dog, and then you have this kind of violence and the dog. And then you have that moment, and it's fun, and it's such a kind of funny transition that says, okay, I know where I am in this film. Like, it's, yes, we've got all this backstory and we have this emotional resonance, but that moment is where you go, okay, I know I can laugh at this film. I know this is going to be fun. That this is not just going to be lots of misery. This is going to be fun, and it's beautifully performed by both actors in that phone call. It's I think such an important moment, and I do, going back to viewing, I remember that moment and laughing so hard, thinking, no, okay, exactly know what I'm doing, where I am here.
I heard you struck my son.
Yes, sir, I did.
And may I ask why?
Yeah, well, because he stole John Wick's car, sir, and killed his dog.
Oh.
Well, because of course, until that point, I mean, we still don't know who the character is. We just get this sense of, we know John Leguizamo's appalled and is prepared to do something, you could argue, very dangerous by slapping around this young gangster. But the minute you use the word and it becomes this totemic thing, and it says, oh, okay, so you started to build that up and it's done with humor. Was it Michael Nyqvist who's playing the villain, who's terrific in it? And I was sort of, in my mind, comparing it with his appearance in the fourth Mission Impossible film, for instance, where it was interesting how, in that one, the big failing of that film was that you had sort of, incredibly high stakes. It was basically, countries were going to get nuked. And yet they weren't clear enough about the motivation of the villain. And it fell apart. It's not a particularly good film, and it's disappointing from that point of view. It's the same actor, but it just doesn't work. In this one, you've simplified it in terms that everybody can connect to much more straightforwardly. We then have all this fun of having built up, who is this guy sort of narrative? Well, why are people talking about him in this way? And then we sort of find out, of course.
Exactly. But they give it to us in kind of glimpses. So we have the scene I really like on rewatching it was when he goes down into the basement and he pulls out the sledgehammer and starts slamming into the ground, where he's obviously cemented something at the base of his house. And then he pulls out, you have the case of gun and all the gold coins. And I really like that. We're starting to get this, like, okay, he's got the weapons, but the gold coins, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, is that's a kind of wonderful little mystery element. They're going, what exactly does this mean? So we start getting these hints that there's something, he's a mystery, but also there is more to this world.
And in a way, the world building doesn't exactly take over, but it becomes much more important. And one of the things that I like about the first film is that not all of it, but a lot of it is very lightly sketched in, but I think is done so in a great way, because I don't know how knowing it was, but it feels like you're seeding things. You're populating the reality in a way that makes it enjoyable and interesting and intriguing. And I suspect that as viewers, first time round, you say, oh, well, I want to know more about that now, because you don't exactly understand the rules. And of course, just the idea of the rules becomes so important after all. So we realize that he is an ex-assassin, and they have just coincidentally picked on absolutely the wrong guy. At which point, I suppose not shortly after that, we find out about the gold coins a little bit, don't we? Because we go to the Continental. I do think the Continental Hotel is one of the great finds of the film. It's a bizarre idea, but I mean, I love it. I think it's great.
In the first film, the Continental is a hotel in New York City that is clearly organized by organized crime. How many non-organized criminals stay in this hotel? I have no idea. But you realize this is a sort of a haven for people who work in this criminal underworld, managed by the manager, played by Ian McShane, and with the concierge, played by the wonderful late Lance Reddick. And what you see is a world which is a hotel, but it becomes like a doorway to communication through the underworld, to resources, all kinds of things. So John Wick arrives, walks in, he wants a room, he passes along one gold coin, and he suddenly is immediately given a room, given whatever amenities go with that in terms of drinks, go down to the private bar, which is the only time we see it is the first film, where he has to go down through the kitchens, down through various circuitous route into this underground bar to meet the manager, and you will be excommunicated from the organization if you do anything on those grounds. So it's a really kind of wonderfully rich place of kind of unsaid communication. And where we start being introduced to notions of rules. And I think that whole idea of you can't perform business on the continental grounds is the beginning of the rules of engagement. The two words I think that come up most in this series is rules and consequences. This was what keeps them, quote unquote, civilized, is that there are rules that they have to follow, even when committing these often horrific acts of assassination. Because our main point of entry into this world is the assassins, like, because of John Wick and all the other characters that we see him interacting. There's obviously a whole other side of criminal activity, which is stealing cars, selling cars, drugs. We see the Vigos, the criminals, kind of store of money and all of his wealth and all of his, and he collects information to blackmail people. Like, we see all of that, but that's not our entry. What we see is the rather civilized world of the assassins. And I think that's a really interesting framework, that actually they're the civilized ones because they live by this code.
In fact, I mean, I mentioned it earlier in this film Payback, which I do feel like they were channeling it a bit when they made this, in the sense that film, particularly the director's cut, but in both versions, it's a film that's very much about the idea that it's a confraternity and breaking the rules is the worst thing you can do.
Crazy. That's why I love you.
You just signed your own death warrant for $130,000.
What is it?
The principal or something.
Stop it, I'm getting misty. And tell him it's 70, will you?
Mel Gibson.
What do you mean it's only 70? It's only 70,000? Hell, my suits are worth more than that.
Payback.
Careful, boy, he might bite you back.
But also this slightly otherworldly feeling, because one of the things about Payback is that it had this weird 1970s vibe, and yet was clearly in other respects set in the late 90s, and it's kind of an aesthetic choice. So here we get introduced to the idea that still got sort of push button phones, and sort of almost like radio phones and ancient telephony. In fact, we see them even smelting those gold coins, don't they? So it's kind of like it's its own currency. And that's how they do business. And we'll get into this more in the second one, but this idea that they're using old tech, it's never explained, but it gives it this sort of fascinating sense of it's a completely parallel subterranean culture, one of enormous wealth, power, influence, all these things. And yet it's this idea of, well, no, they've probably been doing it exactly the same way for a very long time.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's something about the physicality of the mediums that they use that does give it a sense of that history. This is steeped in tradition. And they talk about the traditions of the coins and later the markers. And there's all these emblems of, and there's and they're very tangible, down to the tattoos. The fact that, I kind of love, you talk about the operators who become these figures, these old traditional telephone operators who are the ones who put out the contracts, who send out. And then the most modern thing we see is from their old tech world, a whole bunch of people get dial-up texts, and suddenly you start seeing phones going off everywhere because all these assassins who are always around you. But there's something about that. And all the women who run those telephones, they're presented in it's very old and very traditional, but they're also covered in tattoos and piercing. There's something really interestingly old and alternative. This is an alternative culture. This is that aesthetic that I think sets them apart from the rest of the world.
Obviously, with something like John Wick, for all the stylings and all the various elements to it, a lot of it is going to be about the action sequences and about the choreography of those sequences and how they're shot. And it's got a very personal approach in terms of, it's using very long takes, for instance, hasn't it? And then it's this phrase that always makes me laugh, which is gun fu. You want to explain what gun fu is?
Gun fu. Well, as you say, there's an up close and personal quality to the fight scenes in this. And I think what it is, and my understanding in terms of the technical specificity is, I think particularly in the first film, when they started choreographing the fight scenes, they started mixing judo and jujitsu. So very up close and personal, very physical, lots of, well, I'm not enough of a martial arts expert to be able to talk about this in very technical language, but it is very tightly closed. Keanu Reeves talks about, like, once he has your collar, that's it. Like, he's got you, because it's all very physical. But at the same time, with shooting guns, it's like a physical martial arts fighting, grabbing, twisting, flipping, and then bang bang, shot in the head. The more I watch it, the more you see the routine, again, the choreography. There's a lot of shooting of guns here, but every shot is choreographed. Like, it doesn't feel random. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're just saying a ballet of bullets, or it's not just an orgy of bullets. It's very precise. And I noticed it as you went through them, that choreography of every assassin does it, of shooting, once they're down, and then the final headshot. Like, and they punctuate each fight with a headshot. So it becomes this mixture. So the Gung Fu is this mixture of gunfighting and physical combat that's about being up close and personal, which I think was very different than how fight scenes were done. Any scenes with guns, which would be much more chases through the streets. If you think of another great Keanu film, Point Break, it's a lot of gunplay, but it's a lot of chasing, running through the streets, jumping over fences, with occasional shooting. Here it is much more about kind of close combat and heavily choreographed.
And that's also part of improvements in technology, because all the gun flares and the blood and the smoke, it's all digital. So therefore you can hold a gun up to somebody's head and there's nothing in it. So you're not going to have accidents of any kind. So in that sense, so therefore they can do it, and it looks right when you're shooting the scene, and then you just add to it in post-production.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's intriguing. And so we get to the end of the first one. We've had this sort of revenge experience, and he's seemingly accepted that perhaps he's back, but perhaps he isn't, because it was this whole idea of that he's gone back to having to be the kind of person, because it turns out what he's been off for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
He sort of got married, he managed to get out. Now you're not quite sure where you are by the end of the film, because okay, you've seemingly eliminated the villain of the piece, but you know that there's a bigger world out there, and there's probably problems in store. But he's got a brand new dog. It's a great scene. I mean, presumably you saw it coming when he breaks into a vet's after he's been badly shot, and there's a whole bunch of dogs around there, and he finds one.
Finds one. And this is right. You're gonna think I take the dogs way too seriously, but I think
wow.
I do. I think there's something, again, like I do think that it's a beautiful payoff, not only because we start with a dead dog and he ends with rescuing a dog, but as a dog lover, I have this phrase I often use, that rescue dogs know they've been rescued. Right? If you rescue a dog, they recognize that they're in good hands. John Wick with his wife was the rescue dog, right? Like she rescued him.
Sure.
So he's like, and so I love that idea that he's not just getting another dog to replace the one who died, but there's a sense of finding that connection. And so that's why he doesn't just take a rescue dog. He takes, I can't remember what breed it is, but the bigger, rougher looking one, who's a jolly, lovely dog. But he doesn't take the little cute puppies. He takes this one that looks a little bit more like rough around the edges. And I like that image of the two of them, it ending with them walking down the street in the rain. Or the rain.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I think when I saw it the first time, and not knowing there are going to be sequels, yes, you think something more could come, but it does feel like it's finished. He's killed everybody.
Seemingly nobody left. Yeah.
He was aiming for Yosef, this criminal thug who killed his dog, stole his car, but he kills everyone around him, including Vigo, the father. And, so you feel like everyone in that world is done, but we don't really have a full sense of how big this world is yet. So at the time, it just felt like, yeah, it's done. And he survived, but we don't really know. It's ambiguous. They walk off. He's injured,
limping a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. He's had to staple himself closed in the vets. And then by coming back and saying, we're going to do chapter 2, is then we move into, it is a bigger world. It's not going to end for him as simply as that, and I think that is a great way to start the second one, which is virtually like 2 days later. He's had enough time to go home, sleep, I hope, get some food for his dog, drop his car off. No,
No, no, I'm not even sure it's a couple of days
no,
because
no. It starts right away with
yeah,
him going to get the car, and then you
then he
do
goes
have a
home.
bit
Yeah,
of a break. Because obviously in finding his car, he also damages it beyond recognition.
exactly. He has it for about what, like 30 seconds,
Yeah,
and
then
then it gets completely
yeah,
destroyed. So that didn't last
yes.
long.
And then he has his little sleep before the world calls him back in again.
I should say up front. So the second one's my favorite for some bizarre reason. It's the one that happens to be set in Italy, so maybe that's why it's my favorite. But in actual fact, I think that the reason I particularly like it is, as you were saying, it's the film that then does what a sequel in a way should do. It expands the world of the film, while at the same time reiterating, for those who maybe haven't seen the first one, what the premise is. And we get this Italian mafia don, and we find out about various things. We find out about where this huge organization comes from, what it's called. It's called the High Table.
Yeah.
We find out a little bit more about the Continental. We find out that there are many Continentals. So in fact, this is the first of what will turn out to be many international trips. So it's kind of like John Wick overseas. So in this one, we go to Italy and we get Franco Nero, who's the manager at the Continental in Rome, which is kind of great to have Django himself. So that's marvelous. It's here that we introduce the network and the way that it works. And, you know, you were already talking about the sort of the mixture of old tech and piercings and so on and so forth. So we see them for the first time in this film. So I think, to me, it feels like the film that's bringing together all these different elements, also the idea of the marker, which is how they sort of get the motor of the narrative working. It's how, so that now it's the other kind of noir gangster tale, the one where you are called back in unwillingly, having retired, and this time you feel obliged to undertake a job because you have a debt. And I think that's handled very nicely, and that's what sends him, of course, to Rome. After, of course, not only is the car all smashed up, but what does the guy do to motivate him? He destroys his lovely house. It's so unfair.
It is. It was a beautiful house.
Beautiful house. It's still up. It still exists, of course. But, you know, but in CG world, they do terrible things to it.
Yeah. So no, they blow up his house, pull him back in. And I think for me, I agree with you. I think the second one's probably one of the strongest ones. I have things I like about each one, but I think you're right. I think it's a fantastic sequel. And you're right, does everything a sequel should, expands the world, introduces, or more articulately explores the notion of consequences. Because, you know, when he's asked to rejoin the world, when he has the marker called, John's initial response is to say no, breaking the rules. And he pays the consequences, which is they blow up his house.
How good to see you again so soon, Mr. Wick.
I need you to do this task. I'm not that guy anymore.
You're always that guy, John.
I can't help you.
You know the rules. If you don't do this, you know the consequences.
Accounts payable, how may I help you?
I'd like to open an account.
Name on the account?
John Wick.
And then he has to go back for the job. But then it becomes also about Santonio, who's the criminal who calls the marker. He, of course, wants John, having done the task, he wants to tie up loose ends. So he tries to basically double cross John and kill John. And of course, that's what sends John back on another revenge narrative. And it really is classically noir, because they're all learning that there are consequences. And I think that's why I think this one works really well, because they're all breaking the rules and then being thrust into the next stage of violence because you didn't follow the rules.
It's also got some really great humor, like that very nice sequence, which is kind of a montage, I suppose, when he has to sort of suit up
Yes. Yeah.
And so he goes to see the sommelier, who in fact is the gunsmith, and he goes to get a new suit made, but it's a bulletproof suit.
Yes, it's tactical.
Tactical, and it's and all these things, and they're all done through the Continental.
Yeah.
And I love that whole sequence. It's just so well done. And again, they get the tone just right.
Tone's just right. It's very funny. It's very sharp. And like you said, because they cut back and forth, it feels, again, it's very tightly put together. The humor is just the right size. So the sommelier is brilliant in his deadpan kind of delivery of like talking through the meal of guns, your starters, your main course, your dessert, your after, it's really beautifully done. And so deadpan that it is funny, and like you could watch it for hours. And likewise, the suit, like you have the wonderful tailor making the suit, you have the seamstress who comes in and demonstrates that it's bulletproof. Like again, it's just expanding this world, and it's all played so naturally. This is just the reality of this world, and everything functions. It's an economy where this is all just part of doing business.
And also, I suppose what it does halfway through the film, doesn't it? It sort of pivots to what will become, in essence, the plot for the remaining 2.5 films, which is this idea that a gigantic bounty is put on John Wick's head, and he basically now has a ginormous number of assassins who are all out to kill him because they want to collect 7, 14, 21, we don't know how many millions of dollars it is by the end. Surely it should be euros by that point, but anyway. And because it's mostly European, let's face it. And it's interesting how they do that, because they kind of get to sort of the end of that part of the story, and then it's going to be about that in plotting terms. Other things happen, but in terms of the plot, they find that plot and they really do stick with it. It doesn't really go away. In a way, that's why I think the first one has that advantage too, if you like. It's new, and it sort of determines pretty much, it's like almost the second half of the film, isn't it? It's a big chunk of the film.
Yeah, I mean, because that's it. I think the idea that there are these contracts out, and he's a contract killer. This is what he does, and now the tables are turned on him. We're given a bit of that in the first one because, of course, Vigo does put a contract on him in the first one, but we only get, like, he hires Willem Dafoe as Marcus, who, again, betrays that
very nicely, yes,
beautifully as a friend. But then we have Perkins, who is the female assassin and who is brilliant, breaks all the rules. She goes for it, breaks the rules, she pays consequences. So there's implication that there are others, but like though we have those two, that's the main thrust of assassins after John. Whereas you're right, from the halfway through the second film, this is where we realize the world around us is populated entirely with assassins everywhere, because suddenly everyone's after him. And what you get it moves into these much more elaborate pursuit sequences and fight sequences as he is having to fend off many different assassins trying to get him. And we're always with one or two lead assassins. There's always a Perkins or a Cassian in Italy. They're these lead ones who actually have characters where that's going to be the pivotal fight scene is going to be with him. You have these lead characters, that will be key moments, but in between he is just fighting nonstop, different people. And what you get are these wonderful displays of different types of action sequences, whether it's through cars, hand-to-hand combat with guns. Like it becomes quite diverse. We're not just seeing the same types of action sequences. It starts to change depending on who's fighting him.
In the first film, they had this, I think, very amusing little nod. We have the scene with Joseph, where one of his crew is there playing a video game, kind of shoot 'em up video game, and isn't paying attention. And in the second one, particularly when this part of the plot, shall we say, kicks in, that video game aesthetic is brought into play very nicely. I mean, my favorite moment in the film from that point of view is that one when he's only got so many bullets, and he has to sort of steal other people's guns. So he has to shoot, kill somebody, take their gun, shoot. When he runs out of those bullets, he has to take somebody else's gun. So it's that trading off, and that moment when you're going from one to the next, to the next, to the next. And I think that works great.
Works really well. And it's also, when I was watching this time, it's also because you have the scene I also really liked, I think is a parallel scene to it, is after having committed the task in Italy, and he has to kind of escape through the catacombs and underneath the city. What he's done is left weapons along the route. Pretty much you have to assume, knowing that they're probably going to betray him. Either he's going to be pursued, or he seems to know, like, guess that they're going to come for him. And so I quite like the idea that in that one, he is like laid the groundwork and then suddenly gets the different weapon for this. And he's kind of following the pursuit. And then we balance it out with the scene in the museum where, he only has 7 bullets, and he has to then just keep finding, disarming, fighting, disarming, killing, move on. I think this is where you can tell that the creators, I think they're very talented directors in many respects, but obviously they came from stunt fight choreography, and you could see them, the kind of pleasure and artistry of that kind of choreography, which they are getting from their own interests, which they're borrowing from cinema all over the world, and trying to bring it into this one series that mixes all these styles.
And once again, we get to the end of the film, but not the end of the story, because John Wick breaks the rules. We get reminded of the rules, and we get the Ian McShane character, Winston, and he explains to him about the rules and basically gives him an hour to get out of Dodge.
You have 1 hour. I can't delay it any longer.
Winston, tell them. Tell them all. Whoever comes, whoever it is, I'll kill them. I'll kill them all.
Of course you will.
And the next film, Chapter 3, Parabellum, picks up as he's getting it. I mean, it picks up, I think, a couple of minutes later. So he's still running, but it started raining now. So this is going to be a wet movie, at least for this part of the story. And he's on the run. And at this point, you do start to think, just how many contract killers are there in New York? Because there seems to be a gigantic number of them, which is very funny.
Absolutely. Everyone is. There's a great scene at the end of Chapter 2, which is a show of control. McShane gets everyone to stop, and you realize that everyone around them are assassins who are there. And he's just showing that he's in complete control, and they won't do anything until he's given this hour. So it's a very very unsettling world that we're introduced to.
So we go into the third one, and he has to sort of somehow figure out some way to survive when the entire city is now out to get him. And at this point, we again dig deeper into his character, and we get the Angelica Houston character, and we find out that he's of Russian descent, and he belongs to this tribe. And then we get, again, more rules, more elaboration, more complication, which is all thoroughly entertaining. And he has to go, as we all should at some point in our lives, has to go to Casablanca. So now we leave New York, and this time we go to North Africa.
Yes.
The main supporting artist of this film, which is the one played by Halle Berry.
Yes.
I got a question about the Halle Berry sequence. How many dogs has she got? Because Mum and I got very confused because I thought they killed one of the dogs again. So she kills everybody for not killing her dog.
Yeah. Because he shot her dog. Her dog, however, I've watched this film many times.
So the dog does this despite having a bullet in it.
No, the dog is not injured. The dog has a bulletproof harness.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And he falls, and you see her when she checks him, because she's hidden the gun in the dog's harness, which she hides before they go in. When she goes down to check it, you see her pull the bullet out of the harness. So the dog's fine. So she only has 2 dogs.
So she goes and kills everybody, ruins her life, even though the dog is okay.
Yeah.
That's just silly. I mean, be honest. I mean, at least they actually killed John's dog. Yeah.
I know.
In that case, she needs to stop being so mean about John. She's rotten to him, and it's all her fault, not his. So,
It's a fair point.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah, they have two. She has two dogs, but they are great dogs.
They are great dogs. Okay, that's good. I'll go back and explain Mum about the dogs because we were getting thoroughly confused. Because she kept saying, no, there's only one dog. The other one's dead. It's just, Mum, I can see a second dog, you know. Exactly. So we thought maybe there were three. So
no. If you watch it again, you will see that the dog gets up.
We must have blinked. So there you go.
It's very fast.
Sophia, we're not going in like the old days. Just a conversation.
Nothing's ever just a conversation with you, John.
I have to say, the one aspect of the film that really didn't play for me was when they sort of go in the desert and you get what feels like a panto vision of the kind of sort of, you know, they're all wearing these kind of fairly silly outfits and they're just sitting there in the middle of the desert. And also, it's odd because it adds literally nothing to the plot. He goes there, he says he's going to be a good boy, he's going to go back, they chop half a finger off, he goes back to New York, and then he just takes it back. So what was the point of that? Well, I'm not expecting to give it an answer. I think it's just how it goes in the film, but, you know.
And I agree. I think it's one of the things that you have to accept about the John Wick in terms of decisions of set pieces is often they start with I know I have this vision of John Wick in a full suit and tie and his full outfit walking up a mountain in a desert, you know, and somehow that visual image, and we haven't really talked about the visuals, but I mean, those visual images are so important to the aesthetic of it. So sometimes it does make sense. Like I agree, but I think there's two things for me. I can live with it because it gives him a break. You have to assume he sleeps, because I do think about him sleeping and eating occasionally. You know, he has to, I assume, take a boat to Morocco or a plane. Like he's somehow being transported there. You know, we have to give him a bit of a respite. There's going to be some pause. If he was just being chased around New York, like where's he going to go until he gets back? You know, but I think you're right. I mean, it's because they wanted to do a scene in Casablanca and because they wanted to bring in a different space, and I think it's further expanding the world. And you're right. I think going out, and I know what you mean. It's not the strongest bit of the film, but there is a mythology around the high table. Even the phrase "the high table," like we don't really know what that is. It becomes increasing. I think it works better in the fourth film. Like I think the high table works as a conceit, works better. But I think it's just this idea, this mythologizing, and I think they are falling back on cliches to kind of mythologize the high table by having it be like a Sheik-like character in the desert, this mystical walk under the stars, follow the stars until you're almost dead. And
because he sits above the table, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. To meet the one who sits above the table. Like it's a bit too mythologizing. So I can see what they're trying to do. I don't think it's the strongest bit of it. But I do think if you look at interviews with Reeves or with the director, they will talk about really liking that image of him in the desert or him walking up the sand dune, and they just want to find a way to get him there because they like that. And I think aesthetics, those kind of aesthetic visions are a big part of how a lot of the set pieces get conceived.
Well, you know what? I had this odd experience, which was that I suddenly realized in my head, I thought I knew a bit more about the high table. And I realized I was getting it mixed up with later seasons of Alias. Which, of course, we'd recently rewatched, but it was this odd thing because, of course, yes, that was also a whole bunch of, you know, and I literally, I thought I had images in my head when he went into a big room and, you know, I just, no, totally different.
Similar idea, though. It's this mythologizing of the criminal world that becomes slightly more than just gangsters. You know, there's something more to them. And like I said, I think it works. I think the way they play it in the fourth one works, the visualizations of that works.
I mean, in the third one, we up the stakes. We have this incredibly sort of icy and effective villain in the Adjudicator who just does terrible things, doesn't seem to care about anybody. She just, you know, is this kind of force of nature and just seems to not blink. And so it's a sort of great character and makes everybody feel like they're in jeopardy, really. And we get the Lawrence Fishburne character, the Bowery kin, again, another subterranean character.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think because I think that the Adjudicator is such a strong character, and in this world that is very it's not exclusively masculine, but it is a very masculine world. The way she walks in and commands them and is a real threat through her performance. And again, this language of the world where all she does, instead of handing over a gold coin, she holds over a black coin. And it's now, this is immediately tells them she is a threat, that she represents the high table. It's a really great performance from an actress I don't really know. I don't really know them, but I think it's a great entry into this world, because in a world where the high table is so feared, I think these brief representations of it, I think she works really well to represent why you would fear the high table.
Mr. Wick broke the rules.
Oh, yes. And I haven't got the slightest idea where
You're
he is.
mistaken. I'm not here for Mr. Wick. I'm here because Mr. Wick broke the rules in this hotel. The blood was spilt on the grounds of the Continental, was it not?
Oh, yes. And as a matter of fact, the body gets colder within these very walls.
I'd like to see it.
I think it's a good expansion of what we were getting in the second film, which was, and partly was the advantage of shooting, I think, in Rome, was that it's kind of like, it's the old world. It's old empires. And so drawing on that, and obviously the constant references to Latin phrases and phraseology, I think it's almost like it's what all the criminals who used to be in the Holy Roman Empire did when it fell. You know, they went into business for themselves. And this is what you now have, which is not hard to imagine, frankly, in a horrible way. And so, okay, it's a bit Da Vinci Code-ish, I suppose, but in a good way. And so here we get to see that in action, and we get to see just why it's so frightening for everybody. And also we get to see some samurai action, which is, I think, something they must have been dying to do from early on. I love the fact that it's basically a John Wick superfan who squares up against him. It's such a great idea.
It is. No, he, the character, I think he's called Zero. He is a great character who's brought in to work for the adjudicator. The fundamental goal is to kill John Wick, but along the way, it's to punish everyone who's helped him, you know, is that they're there. So from Angelica Houston through to Ian McShane and Lawrence Fishburne, they all being forced to pay a price for helping John Wick. And he comes in as this figure, and yet he reveals himself to be this super fan. And it's a really nice performance of him, actually a brilliant martial artist, quite intimidating. But like when we're first introduced to him, when he's hired by the adjudicator, he is running a sushi bar outside, and he starts talking, and he's talking in a very traditional, within the Japanese accent, and in a way arguably quite cliche representation of the Japanese. And then when she reveals who she is, he immediately drops all of that and just starts talking. And I think there's something about undercutting these cliches of identity, and suddenly he isn't what we expect. And I think and right from that introduction, you go, oh, okay, he isn't going to be quite what we think. So when he finally gets up, and he's constantly trying to say, like, you and John, you and I, like, he's like the super fan who wants to tell the object of their fandom, we're best friends, really. We could be best friends. Like, you know, we're just alike, and you're not. And John just keeps going, no. but yet he's really a formidable opponent. Like the fight scenes with him are really good, and we do get introduced into a lot more of the kind of samurai fighting. So we start getting more swords and knives. It becomes a nice visual switch from the gun fu.
It is a very, very long fight sequence. I think my mum was saying, is this ever going to end? And I kind of knew what she meant, because as much as I was enjoying it, and because it's all good, but it doesn't take away from the fact that, and of course it's the last part of the film, so of course you're going to extend it. But by that point, it feels like that sequence has been going on for really quite a long time. But it's nothing compared to what basically happens in the fourth film.
Yes.
Where on the one hand, we actually go to Japan, first of all, which is fantastic.
Yep.
It's interesting how the tone of the film in some ways switches, because in the first film right away, he's this person who a big part of his life has just ended, and then it sort of gets worse. But he sort of goes back to who he used to be ultimately, although he doesn't want to. Here, he's been on the run now for, you know, although it turns out it's all taken place within about a month or something, or whatever. But we now are in a mode where we're being told that it's kind of like the end is coming, the end of things. I think right from the opening sentence of the fourth film, I think it's all about death, and how you choose your death is all you've got left to you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then we get into these remarkably elaborate scenarios. I mean, to me, it started to feel more and more like a kind of Sergio Leone type film, where you have gigantic build-up and the scenes are very, very long. But also visually, to me, it feels very different. It feels very saturated as well in terms of the colors. They're super bold. All the films look great. But here, I think partly because the sequences are all much longer in and of themselves, they all kind of visually have almost like their own color.
Yeah,
and starts to dominate. And it's very, you could argue, a bit extreme, and they're really making the most of, I think, the digital technology. But visually, it's, I think of the four, it's probably the most stylized, but also I think that probably the most impressive.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree.
And I remember seeing that with you at the cinema and being very bowled over by that side of it.
Yeah.
It's great to be able to see that on the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say like the visual side, I think, is an important part of all of them. I think they wanted the films to look visually bold, but what you see with each film is the upscaling of that. Like each film has a sequence which looks kind of beautiful. So in the first one, it's the bathhouse sequence, which has lots of neon lights and really beautiful. But each one, it gets upscaled, and I think by the time of the fourth one, there's two things where I think it's increasingly like they're just upping it again. But I also feel like there's an element of they're working towards a conclusion to this series. I don't mean this to sound cynical. It's not. They want to kind of get in a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things they want to do. So I think it is very Leone. It's also very like samurai. I saw in an interview them talking about Wong Kar-wai and wanting to have that kind of Wong Kar-wai color scheme in there. It is heavily saturated. You're right. Every scene has like a different color scheme. The costumes. I talked about the high table in the fourth film. I think Bill Skarsgård is a highly stylized representation of the high table, as the Marquise. It's very distracting at first to have Bill Skarsgård with a French accent, and you're kind of going, oh, I'm not sure if this was good. But the more I watch it, the more it adds to that stylization of him as a character. Like everything he does is incredibly mannered. From every costume to every scene he's in. He's never just in a room. He's in a museum with all these works of arts around him. He's in stables with his horse riders rehearsing around him. Like everything is heightened, and I think that is really deliberate. But I think it's been like built up from each film has upscaled that. So in the second one, you have the Rome sequence, which again is highly stylized. But it feels different because there it's very old world. It's it's catacombs. It's it feels very ancient and beautiful. Here it becomes something quite different, and you get like that amazing sequence where John, a whole bunch of, because again we're in a scenario where everyone's trying to kill him, and he's being chased by all kinds of people. And he enters into a building in Paris, and the camera because we've seen all these scenes of him being chased. So what it does here is now let's move up and have a big crane shot and look at it all from above. And we're just going to watch this whole thing from above, which is like, it's a breathtaking sequence of watching something where you could, if you did it traditionally, if you did it on the ground level, we've been there before. We've seen him turn corners, do this. Yes, someone's coming from everywhere. Dogs. It has all the elements we have seen, but it's shot in a way that makes it look fresh and new and quite breathtaking, and literally gives us a different perspective.
I mean, it's a brilliant top shot. I remember it stood out. Obviously, I'm someone who's particularly interested in sequence shots. It does blow the sequence shot aesthetic right at the end, which is very irritating. You separate the men from the boys when you know how to get out of a sequence shot, and they didn't. They just cut to something else.
They stopped.
Which is what everybody from Sam Mendes to whoever does when they're making movies. Catherine Bigelow is usually better than that. But nonetheless, I think, well, okay, so be it. I think it's beautifully done. Also, of course, fully embracing that video game aesthetic.
Absolutely.
But oddly enough, you don't usually see it from above like that way. So that's adding something to it, which I thought was such a brilliant idea, and obviously, very carefully staged. And here they've got clearly a lot more money to spend. I think at this point the budget's probably 3, maybe 4 times what they had on the first film. So I think it really shows. But also, yeah, it's unusual, isn't it? Because they kind of sort of leave New York in a way. It all primarily takes place in Berlin, Japan, and Paris. And I suspect a lot of it was done in Berlin, actually, probably slightly more than it looks, I think, in terms of where they were actually shooting. And it's very impressive. And again, these super extended action sequences. I mean, there's that whole thing with Adkins in the fat suit. That felt very Sergio Leone, actually, just the whole card playing thing and the 3 guys, and it's very the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Adkins is just because, of course, he's his own action star in his own films, so but they've made him physically quite hard to recognize. On the other hand, I think the principal supporting actor, although he's a kind of co-lead by this point, of course, is Kane, played by Donnie Yen. So tell us more, Stace. I know you're a fan.
I love Donnie Yen. So we are introduced quite early on to Kane, who is a blind assassin who seems to be like John to have got out, or the implication is that he has got out. We're introduced to him watching it was revealed to be his daughter play, I want to say violin. I can't remember what instrument she's playing. It's a violin kid out on the street busking, and he's watching her or listening to her. But he gets pulled back in because they need someone who can stop John Wick. So the Marquise brings him in and basically blackmails him into taking out John Wick, who is revealed not only to be like a fellow kind of assassin, but a friend, brothers, and I think that's one of the things that I quite like about the series is that there is a brotherhood within this League of Assassins, that there are certain ones we're introduced with Willem Dafoe in the first film. Halle Berry has an antagonistic relationship with John Wick, but you also get a sense of they've done he helped her. There's a connection there. There's connections. She's similar relationships. But Kane, you really feel like there is a real bond between the two of them, but he's being brought in to kill John Wick. And Donnie Yen is a leading star, one of the world leading martial artists working out of China, Hong Kong, but he's worked internationally. Like, I sadly probably first really came to know him was Blade 2. So with Wesley Snipes, and he was one of the choreographers. He also plays a vampire in it, and he was really good. But he's done loads of things, really iconic. He was in Zhang Yimou's Hero, loads of great martial arts films. Bringing him in again is like part of that upscaling. Like, I mean, the starting point of these films, you already have some of the best martial artists working, in the industry or in the American industry already from the start. But here, they're upscaling. So yes, you bring in Adkins, who is very well known, but Donnie Yen upscales it. And what I love is the stories about Donnie Yen in the making of this, because the behind the scenes of these films are obviously incredibly choreographed, rehearsed. Keanu Reeves who does a large proportion of his own fighting. It's a small amount of the big stunts he doesn't do, but most of he does. So he's training for months for this. And Donnie Yen walks in the door and goes, "No, this doesn't work. Let's do this." And they describe him as almost being like a jazz artist, and they're making up new fight scenes on set for him. Obviously he did come in early, and I think he worked very closely with the creators, with the directors, to kind of refine Kane's character, really wanting Kane to be more like Wick. I think they originally conceived him as being much more of a Zatoichi figure who would kind of walk in tapping the cane, misleading people about his abilities. And he said, "No, this is a cool world. This is a sleek world. That's who I want Kane to be. Kane's going to come in." And I think that's what he brings. And he brings someone who you genuinely think would beat Wick in a world where you think, well, who's going to stop? Beyond the fact that he must be exhausted. No one seems to be able to beat him. But Kane, you do feel. And I think that works really well for the final, some of the big fight scenes where they go head to head. But also that sense that somehow they're still are they working together? Are they not? How is this going to play out? Because the whole film climaxes not with the big fight scene, but with the duel. And it's going to be a duel between these two equal fighters. Again, talk about scenes that go on. I love the climbing up the steps to Montmartre for the duel, which he has to be there by sunrise.
Oh, the roof right here.
Yeah.
Up to Sacré-Cœur, yeah.
Yeah. So that's, yeah, up the Sekaka. So they have to kind of get up there, and obviously everyone's stopping him. He keeps being knocked down the stairs, and eventually Donnie Yen turns up and says, "You have to get to the top of these stairs." So they end up fighting together. So you have this whole build up to them working together to get John to the top of the stairs so that they can then fight a duel together. So you know that there's an interesting connection between them, and we don't quite know how they're going to play out this duel together. It's a great casting to really raise the ante and the potential that John may not get out of this as easily as he has. I'm sure he wouldn't say easy because none of it felt easy. But there, you genuinely think this could be the person who will stop him, because they're both fighting for the same thing. The Marquis says this. It says, you know, Kane has got everything to lose, everything to win, everything to die for. You know, he is trying to save himself, and he's trying to save his daughter.
One of the slight oddities of the fourth film is that it's got that post-end credits sequence, which is left ambiguous, but I must admit I wasn't sure if I really needed that on the whole. Seemed a bit cruel, but there you go. You know, I felt the story was over. I like
the idea of Kane just happily living out the days with his daughter, happily. But as the series constantly tells us, there are consequences, and the consequences are, in one of the earlier big fight scenes, is Kane has gone head to head with Hiroyuki Sanada, who's the manager of the Osaka Continental, and killed him, and his daughter wants revenge, and he sort of acknowledges that at the time. He says, I'll be looking out for you, or I'll be waiting for you. Like, he knows that's coming because he knows there are consequences. So I don't know, I kind of could have done without it, but I kind of also get there were, you know, that was they were honest with that.
Yeah, it's almost like they couldn't figure out quite how to squeeze that bit in, maybe, you know. So it appears sort of almost like, well, maybe this is in another film. There is this constant talk of maybe there being a John Wick 5. I don't know if it would, you know, what would happen. I love the fact in that documentary where you get Keanu sort of saying, you know, the 10 years he spent playing John Wick in these 4 films, that was his 50s. That's what he did in his 50s. And I thought that's a great way of looking at it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is a decade, and it's amazing.
I have mixed feelings because I love the series, and if they did a 5th one, I would be probably first in line to see it, because I like the characters, and I have a certain degree of confidence in the team. Like, I think that they have a real passion for this. Every film has come from them saying, we're never going to do one again, and then suddenly going, actually, this is the story we want to tell. Like, and suddenly come out with that. But if they don't do one, like, this one ended just right. Arguably, it's the end that Wick wants. He's reunited in theory with his wife. Like, it's, you have the 2 gravestones, loving wife, loving husband written on it. It is the perfect end.
Probably should have said spoiler alert at that point.
Sorry. Well, you can put that at the beginning.
I might put something in.
Yeah. But it's ambiguous. Is he? Like, we don't know. We don't really see it.
They did shoot an alternate, didn't they? Where he revisits his own grave.
I take the ending as quite open-ended, and I kind of, for me, like that, because I like the idea that John's out there, but I don't necessarily, a 5th film would mean he gets pulled back in again.
This is the trouble, isn't it? And I think because you made a film which is all about sort of intimations of mortality, it would seem only to make sense if that's how it pays off. Otherwise, you know, we've seen that even with other franchises where they then change their minds at the last minute, and you know that they're thinking, yeah, this doesn't quite work, because you're setting up for one and you do a final pivot right at the end, and actually that's weirdly disturbing, much as you want it to continue. By the way, do you think Winston, you're supposed to think that maybe he is literally his father at the end, because he says, you know, he says goodbye and he calls him son, and you see he's got the kind of Russian tattoos. Yeah.
I've never thought it was literal. I think you could read that. For me, it's more spiritual. But it could be, because you're right. You get the hint. And I don't think I noticed that the first time. I think I noticed it a while later. I went, oh, yeah, he is tattooed. I don't know. I like the idea that these relationships rise above the rules and rise above it. So I like the complex relationship between Winston and Jonathan, that there is a bond, even though Winston betrays him. You know, in one of the most shocking scenes in chapter 3, when he shoots John.
Which has the most diabolical survival of John Wick ever. I still don't understand that.
No, there's no understanding it. It's sheer will to fight back. He's not just shot, he's shot off a building, down quite a few stories, bouncing off awnings onto the ground. And then
magically.
Well, he's fortunately picked up and carried back, and not well, but
no.
But like you said, there's nothing realistic about these films. And I do I laugh and stuff like that. I go, to me, it just is, the whole world is a heightened world. That's why I think the heavy aestheticization of everything works, because there's nothing realistic about this world. You know, everything is so heightened and kind of beautifully aestheticized and exaggerated that it's excessive. And I mean that in a really positive way. Like, it's wallowing in excess. So I don't really have a problem with the fact that, of course, he wouldn't, because what I like about that sequence is the pain you feel as you watch that, because he may survive and that be unrealistic, but he feels pain. And it's one of the things I think is really good about John Wick, is they don't pretend like he's not the Terminator. You know, he feels every bullet, he feels every cut. He has to get stitched up. They give him medication to help him work through the pain, particularly in the first film. Like, they acknowledge that, like, that side of it to me. So I think if you emphasize that there's pain and consequence and suffering, the unreality of survival, well, they wouldn't have a movie if he didn't survive that fall. That's why, and I think that's why the ending of the fourth film is ambiguous, because we don't see him. We don't see what happens to him. So who knows? Who knows what happens to John Wick? He's Baba Yaga. He is off. He's in the wind.
That's right. Yes, he's the boogeyman. Or as we say in England, the bogeyman. But there you are. It's well, boogeyman would sound like he dances a lot. I still don't get that. So there you go.
That's why Baba Yaga sounds great.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, in Italy, it would definitely be Baba Yaga. So
it's great. It just sounds so mythological.
So we've had Ballerina. We've had a TV sort of sidestep as well. And there'll probably be more. But if people wanted to get a kind of John Wick fix without John Wick in it, what else could they be looking at? Could you recommend something to us?
Well, I think there's some great films out there that I would recommend. There is an outstanding film, if I remember correctly, it's Finnish. It's called Sisu, and it's set in the... I've only seen it once, so I'm going to be fuzzy on some of the details, but it's set around the Second World War in Finland, as the Nazis are kind of burning the country, as they're kind of retreating and they're kind of destroying it. And there's this one soldier, Finnish soldier, who is basically, abandoned fighting, and is trying to, I think, dig up treasure with his dog. He has a dog.
Of course he has a dog.
He has a dog, and it's another great dog. But it's a really good action sequence where he ends up coming kind of like knocking heads, and ends up confronting this group of German soldiers. And it's great. The fight scenes are great. The character's great. It has a similar humor, and I think it really is. And I've sort of, a lot of the reviews revert it like, like John Wick's great grandfather, there's something that has a real energy. So I'd recommend that if you like, for this kind of thing, because again, it looks very different, because it really is set in like, this kind of barren landscape, but it's really has the mixture of great fight sequences with ambiguous characters, a kind of good sense of humor, kind of a deadpan. He's a much more enigmatic hero than John, who I think we do know quite well by the end of the series. There's also, more directly, the series, the sequels just come out, Nobody, which is, I've only seen the first one, but I think, again, it's a little bit more of a working man's John Wick. I think quite deliberately designed that way.
It's the same writer, isn't it? Yeah.
It's the same writer. It has a lot in common. It's deliberately rougher, and it doesn't have that highly aestheticized.
I mean, I loved it. I loved the first one. I thought it was great.
So did I. I thought it was great. I was rewatching a little bit of it the other night because it was on TV because of the new one being out. And I just think that works really well to kind of, again, have this kind of energy of creative fight sequences with good characters. And I think that's one of the things that Wick does really well, is that the characters are what we're invested in. It's not just the action, and that's what sells the action. And I think that's what Nobody does really well. For a different take on the John Wick world, I did really like Ballerina, which is part of the universe, but it's directed by, it has a different directorial team and believably is part of the universe, but it has a different feel to it. It has a different style because it follows this female assassin who's part of like the school of ballerinas that are led by Angelica Houston back in New York, and it's part of that universe. And I think it gives a nice glimpse of that universe. Again, really good fight sequences, but very different because you have a female martial artist who just has to fight, who does fight differently. And they talk about when you're smaller, quote unquote, weaker than your opponents, how do you fight and win that fight? And it's a really interesting, I really enjoyed it.
I haven't seen that one yet, actually. I've been keeping myself pure. It's technically... It takes place sometime between the 3rd and the 4th. Is that correct?
Does. Yes, because there is a brief Wick appearance.
Right. Oh, well, that's
so.
Very
If you're looking for a little bit of a an injection, just need a little bit of John Wick being John Wick. He does turn up.
And Winston and Sharon turn up, although it should be pronounced Karen, but never mind.
They are, I believe. Sorry, I've only seen it once, and I think they are in it briefly. I think it's definitely around the edges, but there is a good section that involves John Wick, very much supporting the female lead, but being very John Wick.
Right. Okay.
So I think there's some really good ones, but out there that have kind of followed in these traditions and help you get a fix.
Well, marvelous. Although I can see if I can get my mum into it. Basically, I think
Well, I would recommend Sisu. I think Sisu is really worth it.
You think my mum's going to like Sisu? That's a long pause.
I don't know. I think if she liked John Wick, she should give it a go.
Well, my mum, I mean.
Yeah, it's funny. It's good action set pieces. It depends what it is that she likes most. It looks very different. Like I said, it's very barren. Whereas if part of and one of the things I love so much about the John Wick is the look of these films. Like I always come out of them thinking I want to teach these films. I want to show these in my classes. I want to talk about the lighting and the camera work and the style, the visual style, because I think it just does action. It's one of the pleasures of watching it is I just love how it looks.
Well, I'll let you know what Mum thinks.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Stace.
Excellent.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for having me back.
Okay, that's it. I'm going to stop recording. You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix, and it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.